Welcome in to another edition of the JMU Sports News Podcast. I am Bennett Conlon, joined by Jack Fitzpatrick. Jack, we're talking about loss number 2 this week.
Oh man, it was a tough loss too. Like it wasn't like the ULM loss where it felt like, maybe they can pull a rabbit out of the hat late. No, they were 21 skunked at one point, down 28-7 at another, and then went on a 21 play drive to keep it 28-14 late.
That was pretty sick, yeah, to be like, hey, we can string plays together. we're not gonna finish off this drive. It was a tough offensive performance, and maybe even more confusing and frustrating to end it with a lengthy drive when you need a quick drive that doesn't result in anything.
You played right into Georgia Southern's hand. Like they're like, okay, either we want to get a 3 and out or we want to draw this into a 20+ play drive where you don't score. And JMU was like, we'll take the latter. Sounds awesome.
Nice.
We'll work some kinks out. Hopefully things will get going. But I mean, it's just so weird that this is a team that scored 70, some defensive touchdowns, some special teams touchdowns in that 70, but then also scored over 50 against Ball State, looked potent against Coastal Carolina. And then also there's games like Gardner-Webb and ULM and now Georgia Southern. And it's just like, wow, this is a team, man.
Yeah, the offense is either red hot or it's non-existent, which is not a great place to live. I'm excited to dive into this one because there are a lot of concerns, a lot of strengths they have, but it's a work in progress, certainly.
You know what else is a work in progress? The NBA season, which is back, and basketball fans, it's that time of year again. The NBA is back. From opening tip-off to buzzer beaters, BetOnline has you covered with the best odds, biggest promotions, and live in-game betting on all of your favorite teams. This season, every game matters. Last season, every game did not matter. BetOnline has every stat, matchup breakdown, and live odds on to bet on during the game. And it's not just the NBA. BetOnline has odds from everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL to political props. Head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right. Where do we want to start this podcast? I mean, we can go. Let's just kind of recap the game. Why don't we?
Okay. Not great, right? 28-14 loss, 21-0 at halftime. They had like a fake comeback, I would describe it as, where like there were a couple times in the second half where it was like, oh, maybe they'll do something. It was more of like a maybe they'll do something and not a like, here we go, it's happening kind of comeback. So they made a little progress. It wasn't like they could have gone the other way, I suppose, and lost like, 42-10. They didn't do that, but it was not good enough. Obviously, the offense was the issue. They won the turnover battle 4-0 and lost the game by 14, which is just gross and hard to do. Not a ton of positives for me from this one.
3 3rd and 9 pluses were converted when the game was like still kind of in question. Wasn't great. You got that pick 6 by DJ Barksdale, jumped awesome. The route amazingly, made it 21-7. And the very next offensive drive, Georgia Southern goes down and makes it 28-7. Then Omarion Dollison early on in the fourth quarter catches that huge touchdown. It looked like they were back.
OPI. But
was it called?
That was so sick that he just like jump ball
was it called?
Slams the guy away and then didn't call it. I was like, hell yeah, let him play.
And then after that, a pick from the defense looked like, okay, here we go. You get then I think they went 3 and out.
Yeah, they like got it to like 3rd and 2, and they just inexplicably took a sack, and then went for it on 4th down. Scramble play, hits Taylor Thompson, but he's clearly about to get tackled. Looked like maybe he could have ran Barnett if he wanted to. That was a weird one, but I think it was another example, right? And we'll get into this a lot. When there is pressure, JMU turns into a pumpkin offensively. So they got to figure something out because I don't think they're giving Barnett a whole lot of like fixes. And then when they do give him some options on the blitz, he's not seeing them. So something is not translating from practice to the games.
Yeah. JMU was outgained 405 to 253 Alonzo Barnett finished the game 22 of 41 for 186, just 186 yards and a touchdown. He then also ran for negative 20 yards on 11 attempts because he was sacked 6 times. Petaway went 13 attempts for 63 yards. Wayne Knight, 4 attempts for 23 yards. The two of them combined to average over 5 yards per carry. We'll talk about this as well. Here's a little tease. In JMU's 2 losses, Alonzo Barnett has dropped back to pass 103 times. In both of those games, they were running the ball effectively, efficiently, and over 5 yards a pop.
Yeah. That's not great.
Okay, so that kind of sums it up. And it's not like, and I don't mean to poo-poo Georgia Southern, but they didn't like go on some huge offensive like big game like they did in 2022 down in Statesboro. JC French went 24 of 33, 3 interceptions, 215 yards. They had a lost fumble. Devin Burgess was the leading receiver with 5 catches for 52 yards. Josh Dallas had 5 catches for 34 yards. Tyler Fromm, their big tight end, which we were kind of worried about coming into the game, only had 2 catches, did have 44 yards, but it's not like they had anyone that necessarily went off except for Jalen White, who had over 140 rushing yards. And not only will we talk about JMU becoming a pumpkin with pressure in this podcast, we're also going to talk about how the defense, while it is really good, is susceptible to big run plays, it seems.
Yeah, I think Chesney was talking about this in a press conference. He was calling it like their third level run fits being bad. Yeah. Like, I think you can see that in the ULM game too. Like sometimes
what's a third level run fit, Bennett?
You've got guys in the secondary who are coming down toward the line of scrimmage with a chance to make a tackle and make it a short gain, and they're whiffing, and it's leading to huge gains, which makes a lot of sense too. If you're on the third level, there are only 3 levels. If you're on that level, you're missing that fit. Like you probably got a lot of green grass in front of you. So they got to work on that a little bit. That was disappointing that they gave up so many rushing yards. It felt like a game where they kind of let like all of the things that Georgia Southern was hopeful would work out coming into the year happen. Where it was like, you know what, I think Georgia Southern could be better defensively. They've got Watson Trent at linebacker, and how did he? Oh, he had 14 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack and a half. Like they made all the players they were like, oh, that guy could be good coming into this year. They made them all look pretty great, which I think was maybe outside of French with his 3 interceptions. But it was frustrating how they let some of Georgia Southern's stars really ball out. And I feel like JMU's stars defensively made some really nice plays, but offensively they couldn't get anyone going. And felt like Petaway is maybe one of the most game-changing players. And for him to get 13 carries and how many catches did he have? 3, so 16 touches. Feels like you got to give him the ball more.
I don't understand why, and this is all, Monday morning quarterback armchair coaching. I truly do not understand why George Petaway does not get more of usage. Like with the way this offense plays, sometimes it just feels like he should be getting more. His highest touches in terms of attempts, rushing attempts, came against North Carolina, where he had 16. He hasn't had more than 13 since that UNC game. 4 touches against Ball State, 13 against ULM, 13 against Coastal, and 13 against Georgia Southern.
Yeah, and like Wayne Knight was good. He had 4 for 23. I'm questioning the lack of Joey Mallory, who we've seen like twice and looked really good both times. It was phenomenal last year at the FCS level. Don't fully understand that one. It feels like they need a game-changing player, and I feel like he could do that at running back. But the main thing is that they just have no answers for pressure, which feels like you have to have, or you're never going to be a good offense. Like if there's one basic thing a defense can do over and over and over, and you can't adjust to it, every team, especially at this level, is going to see the tape and just do that to you. And Georgia Southern was just blitzing, trying to get pressure on Barnett, trying to make the offensive line figure out who to pick up. And it's a jarring stat. You've mentioned it before, but the pressure to sack ratio is getting pretty scary, where it's like if there's a pressure, like half the time it's a sack.
Technically, it's a 33% time it's a sack.
Okay, is it lower than it was? I feel like it was higher.
It was, I think they lowered it a little bit. It's a 35% pressure to sack ratio when blitzed. Under pressure, He's been pressured 63 times, has taken 21 sacks, and he's scrambled. Yeah, they updated the numbers since Monday, and he's taken off to run just 9 times.
That feels weird, kind of, right? He's a great runner, so it's kind of confusing why there haven't been more scrambles. I don't know if they're like asking him to stay in the pocket and try to find somebody. I don't know if it's hard when maybe somebody's coming untouched to make a move and make a guy miss and scramble, but I don't know.
I'm trying to find week by week how they've seen the blitz, but
Yeah, I mean,
PFF
it
makes it
certainly
so
wasn't good
difficult.
in this one.
PFF makes it so difficult to find some of their stats.
It does. It really
Like,
does.
I want a week by week breakdown of pressure.
I know. When you look at I mean, he wasn't even great with a clean pocket though against. I mean, I thought this was not to rag on Alonso, but I think it was his worst game of the year. Um, I just think he wasn't seeing stuff well. He didn't seem like he had his usual confidence. So it was disappointing. I still think he's really good. I love like his traits. I think he's a good player. He took accountability in the press conference for how it didn't go well. I don't think you should bench him because he is only a redshirt sophomore, and I think there's a ton of development left. He's only thrown one interception, even though he has a bunch of turnover worthy passes where he's gotten some luck there. I think you got to stick with him, and I think it's going to get better. I also think Dean Kennedy at offensive coordinator is probably growing a little bit. It's his first year at the FBS level as a coordinator. It's only his like second year at the Division I level as a coordinator. So he's still growing too. It's Barnett's first year in the scheme. Like I think it'll steadily improve, but yeah, it wasn't good.
So he was blitzed 44.9% of the time against Georgia Southern. He was under pressure just 30.6% of the time. So sometimes he was a little happy feet, and he didn't even technically,
Yeah.
by PFF grading, he'd see the blitz and he wouldn't even let it get there to be quote unquote under pressure. When he was blitzed, he went 5 of 17 for just 59 yards. When he was under pressure, he went 2 for 7 for just 8 yards. Like, not very good. So
No. But maybe
there's
even
just
more disappointing of how they like at least according to PFF, 70% of the dropbacks he was quote unquote kept clean, completion percentage under 60%, 5.2 yards per pass attempt. So even when they did protect, I don't know if it's guys not getting open. Some of it you go back, yeah, I think he didn't see guys, but some of it maybe they're not getting open. They just it seems like there's a disconnect between like receivers getting open, Barnett hitting them in all of these like bad offensive performances where Chesney keeps going back to like, we're not winning our one on ones. It's like, well, are there any other like route combinations or things you could do to win them? Are there spots where like, hey, maybe we run a screen where you take a one on one out of the equation, just get a guy the ball
yeah.
or run the ball?
Also, I feel like mesh concepts would work really well with this team.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like it's a lot of, okay, you guys are outside the numbers, win. And it's like, okay, they have showed you now more times than not that they can't consistently win. So why
Right.
don't we put some motion, pre-snap motion, kind of like the Dolphins cheat motion, where you're kind of moving as the ball is snapped,
Yeah.
get them a little bit of a head start. Why don't we run more mesh? Screens worked against Coastal Carolina. You leaned into the screen and it resulted in a few touchdowns. It resulted in some moving of the chains. And of course, we're vastly oversimplifying this. We're not coaches at the FBS level, but I mean, at the same time, you're sitting there watching and you're like, something's got to change. Something has to be figured out to either help Alonzo mitigate pressure or give him a hot read or something. Because another part of when he gets pressured, his time to throw jumps up exponentially. He is averaging over 3.5 seconds to throw when he's blitzed. So he's not quickly getting it out. He's
No.
not seeing a blitz and saying, okay, I know exactly where to go with it. Let me get it out. No, he's trying to make something, but he's not looking to run, which is evidenced by his just 9 scrambles when pressured this season. That's about 13% of the time he's deciding to run. 33% of the time, it's resulting in a sack. He's trying to extend a play. He's trying to continue to try and find the big play, something that opens up down the field. It's not there, and he doesn't have a hot route, and he's not just pulling it down to run.
Yeah, it's frustrating. So according to PFF, they've had 21 screens this year. They're 17 for 21, only 5.4 yards per attempt. But they've been solid where they're completing every screen. They're getting some positive yards. He's been decent on play act. I mean, he's been pretty solid this year, which is why it's frustrating to have these lulls. But yeah, I think they need to change some stuff up and try to be a little more creative. And then also like in Kennedy's defense, the pre-snap penalties on the road have been
Yeah,
just shocking. Like
yes.
we've been talking about the Dukes as being like a Sun Belt East contender, a Sun Belt contender, and then earlier in the year, a college football playoff contender. We can finally put that to bed. A college football playoff contender. You can't be a championship team if you're having like 5 false starts per road game. Like that's just a lack of discipline that you cannot win a championship with.
Oh, that was your meathead take.
That's my meathead take is that I feel like they could use like a little more grittiness when things aren't going well and the discipline has to be better. Like we look at last year's JMU team, which was in some close games. They had some like really impressive, like I would say almost just grit of guys making plays when they needed to. Like the Marshall game, McLeod was pretty banged up in that 20-9 win. He made some big plays late. And then every time they needed a defensive play, Jalen Green had a sack. Like it was just dudes stepping up.
Or even in the App State game, Elijah Surratt
Yes.
just like catches anything that comes near him.
Right? Like when things weren't going well, they had really like gritty performances. Even the Air Force game, the bowl game loss, Surratt, his ankle was not doing great. It was pretty clear he was going to go to a P4 like days after that. And he was still playing through like a banged up ankle and making plays and keeping him in their first bowl game ever. It just feels like sometimes they don't have that. I don't know if it's like personality wise where maybe they have more like quiet lead by example guys, but I feel like they could use somebody loud, like making plays, talking trash. It felt like Georgia Southern's DBs were talking an endless amount of trash. And I don't know if the receivers were doing it back or if they like that kind of stuff. I know Chesney's always talking about like tested and fire. It feels like on the road they have less fire. So it's like if you've been testing them every practice, I want to see somebody step up and like talk a little bit and bring that physical presence that they were talking about against ULM. We're like, well, ULM was really physical. It's like, well, JMU should be really physical too.
Let's just get Jordan Taylor out there, put him on the offensive side of the
Let
ball,
him talk.
let him talk because Jordan Taylor is probably the best trash talker we have on this team. It, yeah, the penalties just make you pull your hair out. There was one where they had back-to-back false starts on a 1st and 10 to make
Yes.
it 1st and 15, then on a 1st and 15 to make it 1st and 20. And it was just like, come on. Like,
And,
just don't.
and yeah, sorry, just to quickly to add, also like for the first quarter, they couldn't snap the ball.
Yeah. And that's like your experienced center, Tanner Morris.
And some of the snaps were certainly bad. And then also Barnett like dropped a couple or at least one where he had in his hands and dropped. And Delvin was talking about maybe the balls were different or something and had a wax on them onto the house or something. But it's I don't know. It's hard for me to get behind that. They gotta make those plays. So there were too many, I thought, sloppy plays where it's like you gotta be able to handle a snap and you gotta like not have a billion false starts. That's like a basic prerequisite of like having a decent offense is being able to snap the ball, catch the snap, and then run your play.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was
It
tough.
was it was just insane that JMU received the opening kickoff, had 2 turnovers, and Georgia Southern scored first. Like, the
Well,
second that happened, I was like, "Oh,
yeah.
this is a loss."
And then the first one, my guy Eric O'Neill gets a tip. Emmanuel Bush makes a diving interception at defensive tackle. They're set up like inside the Georgia Southern 20.
Yeah.
I think they end up losing yards
I
or
think
they
they
ended
go
up taking it. They
backwards
took
6. I think they
they
go
took a
-6.
sack. So the start of the sacks began there. So then your freshman kicker who's in for your injured kicker isn't able to make a kick because it's 40 plus yards when it probably should have been like 30 yards, which it hit the upright. So if it's from 30 yards, it probably goes in because it was drifting toward that upright. Like things like that, where you could go up 3-0 early if you just don't get sacked. It was frustrating. It was really frustrating the way they had negative plays offensively, whether before the snap, dropping a snap, taking a sack. It just felt like it was like completely out of rhythm. And I don't know how it can look like that after they've also, boat raced UNC.
And it's coming off of the mini bye. Like this was coming off of a
Yeah.
long week of preparation.
Yeah.
And nothing looked right. And I talked about it onto the house, but your opening play is an 11-yard rush, the game's longest rush for the JMU Dukes by George Pettaway. And then what do you do after that? You pass, and the next drive starts with more passes. You just showed that you can run against them. And I know you have your opening script. So you have your first, let's say, 15 to 20 plays kind of figured out. You know what you want to run coming into the week. And those are typically like your best plays of the game. But come on, like you see that, you got to adjust. George Pettaway is your best offensive player right now. It's just, and I think to kind of extrapolate out, you can kind of stay on the running backs here. I think the running backs might be a little bit of the issue with blitz pickup. And I think they may be a reason why the pressure when blitz gets home so well. Like there's just times that they do not pick up that extra blitzer. But I mean, if they pick them up, they're running a cover 0. They're bringing 6 guys, so there's all man coverage behind it. You should be able to just throw it up and hope your guy comes down with it, or you got to get that extra beat of protection, and that's just not that's just not happening. And it's putting Alonzo in a bad spot. And I don't think Alonzo is the issue. I think he's young. I think there's a lot of growing pains that are going to be there, but I just don't think like benching him is the right move. A lot of people were calling to bench him to bring in Dylan Morris. I don't think Dylan Morris does any better. He may do worse behind that offensive line when they're bringing blitz. Like Alonzo has shown the capabilities of being a great quarterback. Stick with him. He'll become one of the greatest, I believe.
Yeah, I feel like some of the Jamie fans like don't watch other Group of 5 football, to be honest with you. And then people get really like insulated in the JMU world, and there's like, hey, we're used to the standard of every quarterback wins Conference Player of the Year. It's like, well, that's probably not realistic, but I would encourage people to watch some other Sun Belt games, some other MAC games, some American. Like some of these quarterbacks suck. Like he is a good Group of 5 quarterback.
And I've had my differences with him, but Michael Evangelista had a good tweet where it was kind of laying out the last few quarterbacks.
I saw that one, yeah.
Where they've all been redshirt juniors or redshirt seniors. They've been old guys. They've been guys our age playing quarterback who've taken a lot of snaps. Barnett's a redshirt sophomore. This is his 7th, 8th career start this week.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a young guy. There's going to be growing pains, but he has shown the flashes, the 70 points against UNC, the Ball State beatdown. He has insane touch. He may be playing a little injured too. We don't know, but I feel like he might be. He came up limpy a few games ago, and I think that is the reason why he doesn't scramble as much.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think like that's the other thing too is you had a guy in Centeo who had played a bunch of games coming in. He also started the whole year at Colorado State that prior year, threw for like 3,000 yards. Like he had a bunch of experience. Jordan McLeod, right? Started games at Arizona, played a bunch at USF. Like you're looking at a Barnett who just doesn't have that experience yet. I think he's going to get better. I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about him and the offense and the program moving forward. They're 5-2. Like it's not like they're 1-6 or something terrible. I mean, App State is 2-4, right? They were supposed to win the East. They're 2-4, having a terrible season. I don't think any of us would have predicted, though, that JMU and App State combined in league games are 1-5 at this point, which is pretty shocking.
Well, when you put it like that,
there's room to get better. It's going to be okay. It's not the end of the season, so I think stick with them a little bit. It's going to get better. But it was a bad performance. I think it's fair to say offensively it was a bummer. But Lyle Hemphill's group's been cooking. I'm excited about them moving forward.
JMU has outscored opponents by 122 points this season. They're 5-2. They've scored 248 points. Opponents 126. It's fine. It's annoying.
A P4 win.
A P4. It's annoying though. Like that's the worst part. Like, yeah, okay. Did I come into the season? I predicted a 9-3 schedule, a 9-3 season. Yeah, but I predicted them to start 9-0 and then lose their final 3 games of the season. So my overall prediction, still on pace. But man, is it freaking annoying that you beat UNC, a P4 win at their place, and you hang 70 on them. You go against Ball State and you boat race them into another dimension, and you look like the best offense in the league. And I know it was tongue in cheek, but like RG3 put Alonzo Barnett on his Heisman candidate list after that Ball State game. Like he was getting some national buzz, some national attention. And now he's looked like a pumpkin the last few games. And it's not because he is a pumpkin. It's because there's just a disconnect somewhere, you know? Like, and now this is kind of turning into a rant and a soapbox, but like, that's just the most annoying part of these losses. If you looked at this game in a vacuum, it's okay. It's a Sunbelt loss. It's going to hurt, but you lose some games. Statesboro's a really tough place to play. They're 0-6 now all time in Statesboro, Georgia. But this isn't a vacuum. We were being told all offseason that this team was ready to compete. This team was a brotherhood. This team is fantastic. There's going to be no fall off. The standard is the standard. This is a championship winning team. And then you go and you start 4-0 and you look great. The Gardner-Webb game notwithstanding, you look fantastic. And then you lose to ULM. And, they say all the right things in the post game. And it's like, okay, they're going to get better. They're going to fix on these false starts. They're going to fix on these procedural penalties. They're going to get their offense figured out. Looks like they did on a short week against Coastal Carolina. And then the same issues pop up. And it's like, all right, how much of this is just lip service that you guys know what we want to hear? And how much of it is you actually doing it and it's not resonating with the players? I'm just really annoyed. Just really annoyed.
Yeah. Delvin said I could do it. He said I could bring the negativity out of you compared it to the house, and I've gotten there and I'm proud of myself. No, but it is frustrating. I think that's why people are upset, is not because it's you can't bring back the excuse of like it's a lot of new players, it's a lot of new faces. When those new faces and new players started 4-0, Alonzo had 13 total touchdowns between the UNC and Ball State games. That is amazing. And then they've taken this.
Yeah, and it's not like that player's gone.
No, he's still there, and I think he's had 6 in the 3 games since, which isn't even like horrendous, but they
good,
just the completion percentage is down, like all of it's down. The running doesn't seem quite as dynamic, which I think is maybe because his ankles are banged up and he doesn't want to say anything because he's like, he seems pretty good in terms of being media trained and being like, you know what, it's all my fault.
He's very good at he's very good at media.
But it's not all his fault, and I don't know that he is healthy. So things happen throughout the course of a season. But at the same time, it's very disappointing and kind of shocking to go from having these perfect plans. They didn't punt against Ball State. And then, they can't score against Georgia Southern. There should be an in-between that I think fans are waiting for, where it's like, hey, we don't have our A game, but, we got our B game. We got our C+ game. We got something where we can go out there and score a few touchdowns, especially with 4 turnovers, a +4 turnover margin, and win a game, even if it's not great. Like the ULM game, they should have won that game.
Offense scored no points off of turnovers.
Defense got their 7, but
yeah, defense got their 7. I will say, it's just an annoyance. I get everything around it, and I still am full. I still think Alonzo Barnett will become the best quarterback in JMU football history if he stays out his remaining eligibility. I think he has that potential. I think, the coaching staff, they've shown that they can win at other levels. It would be foolish of me to bet against a guy who's literally only won at each stop that he's gone to.
Yeah.
I'm still positive. I think the trajectory of the program's still fine. It's just annoying that these same issues are popping up and we're getting the same answers post game, and they're holding themselves accountable, but that's to the media. What's being done behind closed doors, I assume the same thing, but then it's just annoying as a fan where you only see the product on Saturday, and it's a disappointing loss. It may have just been exasperated by the fact that I was in Bloomington, Indiana, and I just watched Kurt Signetti hang 56 on Nebraska with all JMU players. And it's just like, oh, that's right. That was our team last year. Jalen Walker, Aiden Fisher were dogs. James Carpenter, the walk-on at the FCS level, is just obliterating corn-fed Nebraskan offensive line guys. And you're just like, huh. D'Angelo Pons is looking good. Elijah Surratt, man, he's still good. Tyson Lawton,
he's been productive for them.
He's their second best running back. Kalon Black barely saw the field. It was all Tyson Lawton and Justice Ellison. But you're just watching that and you're like, okay, maybe I can get this taste out of my mouth of watching Signetti do this. All Indiana fans are like, let's build the statue yesterday. Let's back up the Brinks truck, folks. Let's get him whatever money we need. We can't lose him. I heard a fan say, we can't lose him to the Carolina Panthers.
That's sick. What a world.
But
What
it
a
was just
world.
like, hoping you're going to get that taste out of your mouth and then
Yeah,
they lay an
and
egg.
it stays. I hear you there. I've got a lot of different feelings about the game. One of the other ones too that really comes to mind is like it's really hard to win in Statesboro. Like
They're
I know
really
people,
hard.
JMU fans are always talking about the standard, and I always laugh sometimes when they do that. And like, man, standard is a standard. We can't be doing this. It's like JMU standard is actually losing in Statesboro every time. Like they did live up to that current standard of like getting your butt whooped in Statesboro. So when people are like, "How did this happen?" It happens every time.
Literally every time.
Yeti. It happens literally every time. They're also Clay Helton. They're like 12-4 at home now or something, and like 5-13 in non-home game. Like they're just way better at home. They're a different team at home. It's hard to play there. They're good. So like I think this is one that like is not crazy that they
It
lost
is the
it.
standard.
Yeah, it's the standard. But what makes it more frustrating is the ULM game, in my opinion, where like you don't give up an 80-yard touchdown return fumble. You probably win that game. That's one where like you could still very much be in the East with a road loss to Georgia Southern, as JMU showed in 2022 when they won the East with a road loss to Georgia Southern and a home loss to Marshall. But like the ULM game, I think was really that's the one that's going to bother me probably the rest of the season. Maybe ULM goes on a run, but they're like a 9-point dog to South Alabama this weekend. So I'm not sold on the Warhawks quite yet, but. Yeah, like losing to Georgia Southern is not the craziest thing in the world. I think maybe it's the way they lost that has people so frustrated. But I'm still not like out on this team or this coaching staff. I know that it's a frustrating one though, and I think it's fair to say that Jamie missed an opportunity because they probably should be in a better position in the Sun Belt East. And really, if they could figure out how to handle pressure, they could be 7-0 and like a playoff contender, and they're not. So it is frustrating.
Yeah. We'll move to Southern Miss here in a second. They're coming to town for homecoming. But first, we're going to step aside for a quick commercial break, and we'll be back on the other side to talk about the likelihood of winning the Sun Belt East still. Check out To the House with JMU Hall of Famer Delvin Joyce. To the House drops every Monday, and it's bringing you the best content around JMU football. Delvin gives his takes and his insights on everything happening around JMU football. To the House, new episodes drop every Monday. Subscribe to the JMU Sports News Network to never miss an episode. All right, welcome back into the JMU Sports News podcast. I'm Jack Fitzpatrick, joined by Bennett Conlin. And Bennett, at this point, JMU loses to Georgia Southern. They now have 2 losses in the Sun Belt. There's a lot of things that have to go right for them to win the Sun Belt East, but it's still there. So there's 5 games left for Georgia Southern. They have to lose 3 of them for JMU to then win the Sun Belt East outright. And that's assuming JMU then also wins out, which is a big if with that final 3-game stretch of the season. If Georgia Southern loses 2 games and JMU wins out, they are tied. And if it's a 2-team tie for the division championship, the head-to-head result between the tied teams is the first thing. So that's it. So that you got to hope for a multiple team tie for the division championship, because the team with the highest win, this is the first tiebreaker. The team with the highest winning percentage in games played among the tied teams shall be declared the division champion. So I'm not entirely sure what that means. No, it's your winning percentage essentially head to head, but with multiple teams. So if you win out, you would be 4-1 among because then Georgia Southern has to play. You need to beat Marshall because Georgia Southern beat Marshall. You need to beat App and you need to beat ODU, and then you got to hope that App and ODU beat Georgia Southern.
Yeah, so there's the one scenario, and this is probably premature given how Jamie's offense looked last game because the winning out doesn't look.
Yeah, the winning out is like maybe the most difficult part of this whole scenario now.
Yeah, so you gotta win out, and then certainly if Georgia Southern loses 3, you can just win the um, division over them, and you'll have a tiebreaker over everyone else if you win out. But then they would still technically need some help. Like I think Coastal Carolina. No, Coastal Carolina's got 2 now because they lost. So you actually don't. You just need if Georgia Southern loses 3, you take care of business. You did it. It's gonna be hard though. Like Georgia Southern looks pretty good. They're 3-0 in conference, and then you're expecting them to go what 2-3 the rest of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's asking for a lot, even though it's possible. I think they could be an underdog in their next 2, so it's certainly not impossible. I would say for JMU fans, you got to focus on just like getting through the next 2 and then see what happens in November. But if you want to go crazy tiebreakers, if you are tied, you don't need Georgia Southern to lose 3 because Georgia Southern could lose 2. JMU wins out. They both have 2 conference losses, but then you need a 3-way tie or a 4-way tie. So you need ODU to only have 2 conference losses. They already have 1, and JMU would need to beat them. So ODU would have to lose to JMU, win all of their other conference games. And in the same situation, you could apply to Marshall, which is 2-1. So you beat Marshall, but Marshall wins all of its other conference games. You have a 3-way tie between Marshall, JMU, and Georgia Southern. Both of those, I think, actually, you need it to be ODU. So sorry, let me scrap the Marshall one as we get deep into the weeds. Georgia Southern's already beaten Marshall, right? That's their 1 conference loss with that comeback. So you would need it to be ODU. So I guess root for ODU to win a bunch of games, except for JMU, and you could have that 3-way tie. I don't really see the 3-way tie happening. I don't see JMU winning the East. It doesn't seem all that likely, but their best scenario is Georgia Southern takes a bunch of losses and falters, and the Dukes need to win out. And that's really got to be their focus. In general, it's just like take care of a bad Southern Miss, go to your bye week, come back against Georgia State looking good, and then go into that tough 3-game stretch that we've talked about with 3 rivals and do your best. See what you can get going in that little stretch.
If you're putting a number on it, percentage likelihood of JMU winning the East, what is it?
Yeah, I think FPI gives it like 10%. I think FPI is still too high on the Dukes. I would give them like 5%. I really don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think they're going to lose again.
I do. Yeah. I mean, that final 3-game stretch, we talked about it all in the preseason. We've talked about it this season, but on the road at ODU coming off of a bye, on the road at App State coming off of a bye, that will probably be in Boone, North Carolina. And then to finish out the season home against Marshall. That is just a tough, even say what you want about ODU, App State, and say what you want about ODU, App State, and Marshall. They may not be the strongest Sunbelt East teams. They may not be what they were last season or 2 seasons ago, but that's still like 3 rivalry games.
Yeah, those are hard. And even App, like, they haven't been dreadful their last couple of losses. Like, Louisiana game was competitive. Marshall, they scored a bunch of points. So, like, they might, I don't know, sometimes they just sort of find stuff late in the year.
Yeah. So super fun. All right. Southern Miss is coming to town for homecoming. Is this a get right game for JMU, or is this what they call in the industry a trap game?
If you get trapped after a loss, then you got some problems, especially with a bye the next week. Southern Miss is like a bottom 10 team in the country. They're bad. So if this game is like close, or well, I don't even care if it's close. If JMU loses this game, I'm sounding the alarms. Like I'm very concerned. But like honestly, just win. Like I don't care what the score is. I don't care any of that stuff. You just got to win. Get to 6-2. You get bowl eligible. You go into a bye. There's no reason they should lose this game. No, I don't think the interim coach bump is going to be worth 24 points, which is basically what the spread is. So, like, you got to win.
Key to the game in this one, though, is stopping the run of Southern Miss. Like, you got to build a lead and force Southern Miss to pass the ball because passing the ball, they are abysmal. 129th in the nation in EPA per pass at negative 0.27. I've never seen an EPA number that low. That means every time they pass the ball, essentially 0.3 of a point is coming off of the scoreboard. That's horrible. And then offensively rushing the ball, they rank 80th in the nation with a 0.01 EPA per rush. And they rank 27th in the nation in offensive success rate when rushing the football, have a successful run on 45.6% of all of their rushing plays. Pretty clear what they do well. Got to have the third level run fits that Bob Chesney was talking about that failed against Georgia Southern. If you let them bust out a couple 20+ yard gains, a couple explosive runs, oh boy. Oh, brother. But if you're able to stop that, build up a quick 21-0 lead in the first quarter, which you should be able to do against one of the worst defenses in the entire nation, you should be fine. But if you let them stick around and you let them lean on their run game a little bit, I do get a little worried.
They are 0-6 against FBS teams, with every loss coming by double digits. In their 3 road games against FBS teams, they lost by 31, 37, and 17. This shouldn't be a game. Like, if this is a game, it'll be a little concerning. But if you lose it, it's highly concerning. This is one that, like, it's a get-right game. And I saw, like, a really funny fan take the other day that was like, God, if they come out and play well against Southern Miss, I'm gonna be so mad. Which is like the most broken fan brain ever, where it's like, you what the hell? But like they should come out and play very
But
well.
also I agree because but
also, yeah, it's like I'm gonna be so mad if they play well. Like, why? But they should come out and look great in this game and blow them out, and then they should have a bye and they should look great against Georgia State. They should be 7-2 going into that stretch. I think that's like when you talk about the standard. I do think their recent standard is enough to beat a team that's firing their coach mid-season on homecoming. Like, you're at home, it's homecoming. The other team is so bad that they said, "Get out! Like, you can't coach here anymore." So yeah, like they should win. The keys to a win is just like Southern Miss doesn't make any, illegal roster changes mid-season. Like JMU shows up on time and everyone's hydrated. They should be fine. Like, it would be ridiculous if they lost this game.
I do love that fan take because, like, I do completely understand where they're coming from. If they win, if they hang 50, why didn't they use a couple of those points for that Georgia Southern game?
Yeah, I'm excited for this one though. Just get back to doing what you do. I want to see Barnett play well. I want to see the running game play well. This is a good chance to win, and I still think the rest of the season is going to be a lot of fun. And as much as I think like they're not going to win the East, pretty good chance that Georgia Southern's an underdog in their next 2. They play Thursday against ODU. They are an underdog. ODU's nasty. And
I've been saying ODU's good. No one's believed me.
Who's the best 3 and 4 team in the conference? South Alabama or ODU?
ODU.
They're both dogs.
ODU.
So then they're playing, South Alabama that next week. So I could definitely see Georgia Southern taking
2 quick losses,
and then you've got JMU if they can get their win and then a bye week, they could be sitting right there going into November. So it's not crazy to think it could happen. Now you'll know after the bye week, right? If Georgia Southern goes like 2-0.
Yeah. Also,
wrap.
that ODU game's also massive because ODU's the team you need to win out, except for the JMU game, to then have the chance to get the 3-game tiebreaker. So if ODU wins that game, Georgia Southern is sitting at 2 losses in the conference. If you've won your game against Southern Miss into the bye week,
yeah,
you know what I mean.
So I think if Georgia Southern beats ODU, I think the East is over.
Yes, but if ODU beats Georgia Southern,
then you could have some fun.
Oh boy, this podcast will get a lot more positive.
It could be a lot of fun. But also, like, regardless, if you don't win the East, but you lose to like the East champion and you go 9-3 or 10-2, no one's gonna sit here and be like, Chesney, like, that's not okay. Like, it's fine.
I will say that loss probably bought us another 12 months with Bob Chesney.
At least.
So, okay. You want to go to listener questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Any other keys to the game against Southern Miss? Stay hydrated, show up, don't miss the bus, and stop the run.
It should be an enjoyable homecoming for JMU fans, I would think.
Before we get to the break and listener questions on the other side of it, quick injury update.
Oh, yes. Good call.
Because we had some big stuff coming out of press conferences. Ayo Adei, done for season, expected to return for 2025. Use a red shirt and return for his, I guess it would be his redshirt senior year. Whatever that injury was against Gardner-Webb that he tried to play through against UNC, I guess I'm very interested to see kind of what went on behind the scenes. Like, this is me just hypothesizing now. It's been said that that's an injury he's played through before.
Yeah,
However, I wonder if he chose to get surgery or do something more drastic to try and just solve the issue rather
it's
than like
possible.
trying to
Yeah,
learn how to manage it.
yeah, because he Chesney didn't technically say that he wouldn't play again this year or whatever, but for Wyatt, he was pretty clear that like Wyatt is trying to play again. So like I guess Io could play too if he's healthy, but it didn't necessarily seem like that was going to happen. Wyatt, it seems like, is still building up strength in his leg, and they want him to play. But and then he was also Chesney was maybe less certain that like Wyatt is definitely coming back. Although it sounded like they were going to keep that redshirt option. It's unclear, I guess, if he would want to transfer or what. But I think he was in the portal last year and then decided to come back. If I'm not mistaken, I think he was briefly in it and then stayed at JMU. But anyway, getting Io back is huge. The possibility of having Wyatt back pretty significant also because you're probably returning Barnett. Like, okay, all right.
Yeah. If Wyatt comes back, that's massive. That's really nice. Like that's good.
Yeah.
Also, wouldn't be a medical red shirt. Tyshawn Wyatt has not
Yeah.
used his initial red shirt because of COVID,
Totally
so
forgot about that.
he would be completely eligible to play as a red shirt. I misspoke and said it would be a medical red shirt.
I think I did too.
Technically,
Yeah.
he'd be taking the red shirt for medical reasons, but he would not have to apply for the waiver. So he could play as long as he doesn't play this week and then play out the rest of the season. He will be eligible for the red shirt. You can play up to 4 games and maintain your red shirt. So there's 5 games remaining. Doesn't sound like he's playing this week. So he'll
But they
likely be able to
also
redshirt.
they could get like really cute with it, which I think they might, and be like Georgia State at home off a bye. Like, do you try to do him last 3 games and the bowl?
Does the bowl count as towards eligibility?
I thought it counted as a game. Does it not?
Well,
I
I'm in FCS fan brain because the playoffs don't count.
really
Yeah, so the FCS you can play up to 4 games and the playoffs.
red shirt rules college football.
So like in the FCS, a lot of coaches will play the system and like play a freshman the final 4 games of the season that they really like, who
You
then
are
can
right. They
play.
don't count against that 4 game limit. Good
Yeah,
call.
thank you.
So okay, so you could have him for those. What about a Sun Belt championship? Is that still postseason?
I think so because it's not
Okay.
on the schedule.
Okay. Well, then he could be coming back quite soon, which is very exciting because you could also, given his experience and the injuries at left guard, he could also rotate at left guard.
Ooh.
Doesn't have to just be left tackle for Wyatt, which would be a significant help.
Carter Sweezy also off of the 2 deep. He is done for the season.
Probably right. Do you say
I
that
thought I
officially?
read that.
I don't know if he said that, but probably.
Sorry, I might be mixing things.
He's been in a boot though, so it would make sense that he would be
Riley
done.
Robel underwent surgery and he'll be done for the season.
Yeah, I don't think either of those guys are coming back. So I think they're both done, which is tough because those guys are nice at guard.
Very nice. Like those might be the 2 best guards on the team.
Yeah, saying
Riley Robel is so
you
good.
gotta give Cole his credit. He's a dog.
That's true. Cole Potts is like the epitome of just like a guard. He goes
Yeah,
in, does his job, hardly ever gets beat. Okay, so Cole Potts might be okay, but Riley Robel is just so fun because he's like this
he's in
swing
there,
guard
man.
that
He's
can
good.
do.
That trio is pretty incredible, and then having Toner is really nice to still have him
Yeah,
there, and he's been playing. But yeah, if you can get Wyatt and like rotate Toner and Wyatt at left guard, would be help.
or
Like I don't know, that would
maybe
be a
throw
big lift.
Tyshawn Wyatt over on right tackle. Rotate him at tackles.
You could put him rotating with Ramil left. You can move him wherever you
Yeah.
want.
Other injuries, Noe Ruelas. It was reported by Katie Harper of the Daily News Record that if it was a game at home for Georgia Southern, he would have tried to go, but he did not travel with the team to Statesboro. So expect him to try to go on homecoming, but they don't know for sure if he'll be ready to go. We're also not entirely sure what the injury is.
Yeah,
Probably a hammy.
I would just rest that guy and get him ready for the stretch run. But, like if you need clutch field goals against Southern Miss, like you're not winning the East. So
Good point. Any other injuries? Josh Pfeiffer was in concussion protocol.
yeah, I guess Pfeiffer was in. Chris Fitzgerald limped off, but Chesney
But
said he's good, which probably means he won't play.
probably he's
Based on
out
his
for 3
Chauncey Logan,
weeks.
yeah, based on his previous comments.
Based off of everything he is IO. He's really I don't know how into Seattle Seahawks football you were, but you should have been really into it. Pete Carroll was notorious for just being like, yeah, this player, yeah, he's day to day. He's dealing with something. He'll be back soon. And then like just doesn't play for the rest of the season. Like Kenny McIntosh was like their draft pick last season, and he like suffered an injury, like involuntary, like rookie mini camp or something like that. And they asked Pete Carroll, like, what's his timetable? And they're like, it's something he's nursing. He should be back soon. IR, missed the entire season.
That's incredible. Dan Campbell's the opposite, whereas coach speak for injuries is like very low, and he'll just tell you how it is.
Have you seen the coach speak index?
Yes, he's like his injuries. Coach speak was like praising him the other day, where they're like, man, he's an honest guy.
If you're on Twitter, first follow us at JMU Sports News. Secondly, follow the Coach Speak Index. It follows NFL coaches, and it has an entire spreadsheet to track what they said and what actually happens, and it measures how much coach speak each coach does. Fantastic. I love it.
Me too.
All right. That's it for the injuries. We're going to step aside for another quick break and be back on the other side for listener questions and news or snooze here on the JMU Sports News Podcast. Check out To the House with JMU Hall of Famer Delvin Joyce. To the House drops every Monday, and it's bringing you the best content around JMU football. Delvin gives his takes and his insights on everything happening around JMU football. To the House, new episodes drop every Monday. Subscribe to the JMU Sports News Network to never miss an episode. Welcome back into the JMU Sports News Podcast presented by Bet Online. I'm Jack Fitzpatrick, joined by Bennett Conlon. It's time for some listener questions, Bennett. We posed this question over on our Twitter at JMU Sports News on Twitter, also on Instagram. Do you want me to read you the first question?
Oh, sure.
Ryan, JMU 2019. Little questionable because his @ is Ryan JMU 2018, but that's besides the point.
He says we can just call him Ryan.
Does he really say that?
Yeah, I think that's in there. Which is probably because we say that every time. Think of our crap.
Sorry, Ryan. With the offense being hit or miss, he did actually say that. With the offense being hit or miss, depending on the week, how much of it is being on the road and the Sun Belt playing a part in it? Injuries, inexperience, and scheme being a bit off are other factors, but everything is worse when away from Bridgeforth. I like that question.
That's pretty common for most college football teams, right? Like it's all just a little worse on the road. Like it helps to have.
Yeah, but it's not a little worse on the road.
Okay, that's true. I don't think that's a totally fair excuse, but it's clear that that's happening, right? That they're worse on the road. So I don't know exactly why, but yeah, they are significantly worse offensively on the road, except for UNC.
Except for UNC, Delvin was talking about how that could have been just a point where they got up. Like that is a P4 opponent at UNC, so you're kind of bringing your own juice. Also, ULM and Statesboro are kind of sleepy environments. I know ULM fans have been in our YouTube comments saying, we never said there was 20,000 people there. It's just a raucous atmosphere. We love Monroe, Louisiana. All right, shut up. You claim there was 20,000 people in that stadium. There was no more than 20 people, period. I mean, that place was empty. It was a sleepy atmosphere. The whole upper deck was empty. And the same goes for Statesboro. It was an empty environment. I think it's sleepy. I think this team kind of has to dig deep and figure out how to like create their own juice.
I think that's fair. I also think I was cracking out. There's some occasional JMU fans are like, man, like thought Georgia Southern would have a better crowd. It's like you can't talk crowd trash after getting destroyed in their place. Like, what are you doing? Like, oh yeah, nice fan support you've got. You should see Bridgeforth this weekend. It's like we're 2.5 games back in the East. Calm down.
Ryan also asked, my second question is how they can improve the offense for the remaining games. More run to pass ratio, more QB scrambles or carries for Knight, Purdy, and Petaway. Our run game is better than last year and should improve more. Would it help to stabilize the offense? Ryan, I'm right there with you. We got to run it more.
Yeah, I do think that would help stabilize it if they leaned on like the UNC transfer, who's really good.
Or the FCS transfer, who's run 9 times, averaging 7 yards a carry and has a touchdown.
I don't understand why you bring Joby Mallory in to not even give him the ball.
But here's a potentially really pessimistic take. None of the running backs are elite at pass protection. Joby Mallory can't be that much worse at pass protection than them. Also, Joby Mallory is 6'1", 240. He just has to get in front of a linebacker and he impacts it. Like, what does Joby Mallory mess up in practice so much that he's not getting carries? I'm not saying over anyone, like, in addition to.
He should get some carries, man. Pass blocking grade for Petaway, who led the running backs with 38 snaps, was a 32, which is poor on PFF. Purdy was at 40.9. So, yeah, neither of those guys were cooking in pass pro, but they do other things to help you. So they get in. Joey Mallory's like 240. He's a truck. He could whiff every time on pass. He could whiff every time on pass pro. The other guys are whiffing too. So just give him the ball.
Man, we are Joby Mallory stands here. We should see if he has an NIL marketplace. You know how some of the players have we should get Joby Mallory shirts.
I would like that.
That'd be pretty fun. If we get Joby Mallory shirts, we'll just rock him 24/7. I'd never take mine off.
True.
Sully, our boy Sully, at Dink Mac and Cheese. Sully does some fantastic stuff for us, our on-campus contributor. The roster changes in the offseason will be less dramatic than last year, but based on what we've seen so far this season, to what degree do you expect Chesney will attempt to retool in the transfer portal this year? I love Sully. Already thinking ahead to the transfer portal.
It's a great question. Me too, man. Roster management is the key to success. I feel like they're going to have a pretty drastic receiver overhaul through like graduation and stuff. But I feel like they need to heavily go out and be like, I want to get a number one. Like, I want to get a go-to guy that it's going to get open. Like, I think they need to do a little bit of a deeper transfer portal receiver haul. And they added some guys who maybe haven't clicked. They've added some guys who have been productive. I think Cam Ross has been pretty good, but maybe it's the consistency there and they need Taji to step up a little more. But I would expect that to be a position where they get a lot. And then like linebacker, you're going to lose Dobbs. So certainly you gotta do some stuff defensively.
Also going to lose Kyrie Mans, Lloyd Summerall, Emmanuel Bush.
I think he's. I thought he was Richard Jr.
Is he? I'm trying to remember who leaves my
Fitzgerald.
team.
Fitzgerald.
I'm trying to remember who leaves my team in college football 25 from year 1 to year 2.
Let me double check
because it's pretty drastic.
Bush Bush is Richard Jr. So he can come back.
Pat McMurtry is a senior. He's gone.
Potts.
So you're going to lose a good amount of talent. And so, but you're not losing an entire roster of all Sunbelt caliber players. So I think Chesney will have the opportunity to go into the transfer portal, kind of have a better idea to kind of hone in on instead of, the spray and pray approach to try and just get as many guys in to fill out a roster, which he did a great job with. Eric O'Neill's a dog. Lloyd Summerall is starting to flash. Chris Fitzgerald from Youngstown State. Chesney has shown an ability to identify guys from lower levels that are going to be good. Eric O'Neill, George Petaway, even, who doesn't get a ton of run, but you can kind of ID him as someone who's going to have talent at the next level. Chesney's shown that. Now he'll have the ability to go out and do that for the transfer portal and maybe hone in a little bit more on like, all right, exactly what I need. Instead of an entire roster, I need 2 wide receivers, 3 defensive linemen, and a linebacker. Let me go out and really start to pound tape.
And he actually knows the roster. Like last year, he was saying it was helpful to be at like bowl practices, but it's not quite the same as like going through a whole season and having those game reps with your guys. And then a lot of it too, of course, is going to depend on who stays.
Yes.
Right? Can you retain Trent Hendrick or Chauncey Logan? Those some of those guys, Eric O'Neill, Petaway,
Jacob Thomas, Chase Regan, KJ
Flo.
Like the entire secondary are dogs. Can you retain a majority of them?
Yep, that's going to be a major key.
Can you retain Lyle Hemphill?
Yep, that one's going to be massive.
I've been thinking about that all season. I have forgotten about transfers, and I'm like, man, it's really fun to have Lyle Hemphill for this year. My mind hasn't even allowed me to assume that he'll be back next. Because like, if he's not getting a call from a Power 5, Power 4,
it would be surprising,
or even a G5 like head coaching gig.
He's got really good experience. That's the other thing too. Is it's like, why is the offense not clicking as much? It's like, well, Kennedy's getting his feet wet at the FBS level, where like Hemphill been a DC or co-DC at the ACC for numerous seasons.
I also say that like some fans were trying to turn on the defense a little bit in that Georgia Southern game. They were out there for so long.
Yes.
Like, I think they were on the field for 20 of the 30 minutes in the first half. Like, when your offense starts to struggle, it impacts every part of your team. So the defense had 4 turnovers. They were fantastic. I love that defense. Hitty at Mr. JMU. Simply, how great are the Dukes? Question mark. Pretty great, right? Question mark. Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, men's soccer may be one of the best teams in the entire nation. They are a
Dogs.
bunch of dogs. Field hockey, dogs in the MAC. Women's soccer, shout out Ginny Lackey,
She's incredible.
dog. You know, she leads the Sun Belt in points, but this is from Shane Metlin's article over on the DNR. She leads the Sun Belt in points, but has played 4 less games than the second place person.
That's very cool.
She's so good.
Dog.
Dukes are good.
Really good.
Caleb David at CH_JMU_19. Do you think AB3 can learn to be effective against the blitz in season? If he was able to become a dangerous scrambler and force teams to have a spy, that could help. And getting better with checkdowns. Teams have figured out his tendencies now that they have some tape on him. I think he was a good scrambler. I think you found something, Bennett. I think he might be a little injured.
Yeah, I think he's a little banged up. So that's obviously not quite what you're looking for. So hopefully they can get him healthy, which I think would be a significant boost. And I think some of it is coming up with like a better plan. Like you can run a screen. That seems fixable. So I think they'll get better. But yeah, I think maybe some of it's going to be like an off season of like, all right, let's really get you into some stuff that you're comfortable in when there's pressure.
Also, Caleb, on the point about forcing teams to have a spy, if you go back and watch the ULM game, they spied him. Like after the first drive where he had that scramble, they were like, oh, we'll just rush 5 and have a spy. We'll rush 4 and have a spy.
Right.
So I think that's kind of they're figuring it out where that also could be a reason why he doesn't scramble as much. There could be more spies on him that we're not seeing on the broadcast tape. Caleb David also asked, play calling late in the fourth quarter felt like they gave up and were just trying to score to get a moral victory. Did it feel like that to y'all? Lots of running and short passes inbounds. According to the coaches, they were fighting to the very end, but I was watching it with my friend Tim at a bar in Bloomington, and they were like the beginning of that drive, and they ran the ball like twice early on.
Weird.
And I was like, what are we doing?
I think Jesse in one of his pressers kind of made it seem like he was asking Kennedy what they were doing at that point, where he's like, yeah, I kind of wanted us to move like a little faster. So I think there's a little bit of a disconnect at times between those two.
Yeah, I think so too. All right. Do you want to take it to news or snooze real quick?
Yeah, let's do it.
Even a news or snooze. I think we've forgotten news or snooze sometime. We've
We've
got it last week.
We've been doing some.
Yeah, we forgot it last week. But now it's time for everyone's favorite segment. It's time for news or snooze, presented by Cinnamon Bear Bakery and Deli. Bakery and Deli. You can find them right across the street from the Atlantic Union Bank Center. Check them out next time that you are in Harrisonburg. Fantastic stuff over there. And they are the presenting sponsor of this year's News or Snooze.
News or snooze. Okay. First one, we're going outside the Sun Belt here. Former JMU head coach Mike Houston fired at ECU. News or snooze?
Of course it's newsworthy. He was fired. He was the first coach fired in this cycle.
Yeah.
You could argue that the reason Will Hall was fired was because Mike Houston was fired. The Southern Miss coach. Southern Miss just didn't want to be the first one to fire their coach.
He had an up and down tenure there.
Yeah, but he never got them to where they wanted to go.
That is true. He did rebuild them from trash
to slightly less trash.
He had him in a couple of bowls. It was like, okay, maybe this is going in the right direction. And then they go 2-10 last year, 3-4 this year. Charlotte put on a show against them, which anytime Biff and the 49ers are putting on a show against you, something's not going too hot.
Yeah.
He's also supposed to be like a defensive wizard, and they have not been a defensive juggernaut this year.
Yeah. So newsworthy.
Okay. We like that. Here's one. This is from Lyle Hemphill, which I thought was kind of funny. He told the media that his third down plan was trash.
I love this guy. I love Hemphill. Yeah, I agree. Newsworthy. I mean, you allowed 3 3rd-and-9 pluses. 2 of them were 3rd-and-10s and a
No.
3rd-and-14 in the second half when you kind of like needed these stops. And I think 2 of them, at least 2 of them were runs that just broke free. Like they essentially were conceding a punt and they broke them for huge gains. So yeah, it was a little trash. And I respect the hell out of Lyle Hemphill for having like Bob Chesney's his coach speak is fantastic. Dean Kennedy learned under Bob Chesney and Dan Mullen, but he knows the coach speak stuff. He knows what to say. Lyle Hemphill doesn't give any F's. My man's just out here throwing around quotes. It was trash. It was bad. I got to be better. I love that. Thank you, Lyle.
Okay. Here's a question for you. News or snooze, not a quote. Taylor Thompson, only 3 catches, 5 targets against Georgia Southern. News or snooze on some of this target share stuff. Should the tight ends, Logan Kyle's shown some nice stuff. Should the tight ends get back to having that huge role? It feels like they were really using them in some of those games. I think Thompson and Kyle both had touchdowns against North Carolina. Thompson had a touchdown against Coastal. He also had a touchdown against Ball State. And then you look at he was probably the best receiver against ULM. News or snooze on the Taylor Thompson target share?
Newsworthy, and this might be just because I'm a big Taylor Thompson stan, dating back to his time at UNC Charlotte, a seam god with the 49ers, and
Yeah.
didn't get a lot of run last year, seemed to get in the doghouse with Kurt Signetti. This year, really focused on, bettering himself, and a little bit of a slower start, but then a touchdown against North Carolina. You mentioned it. Ball State, a touchdown against Coastal Carolina. From Ball State to Coastal, he had 12 catches, 2 touchdowns, and about 200 receiving yards. That's where the lion's share of his production came, was those 3 games. And I thought he was starting to get involved more. The Coastal game, just 2 receptions, but that touchdown, he had that amazing hurdle, and that game kind of got out of hand where that game script just got a little funky. So when the game mattered, he was being targeted. I don't know if it's Alonzo not targeting him. I don't know if it's him not being necessarily the number 1 receiver on some of these routes, but I would love to see Taylor Thompson be the lead target getter. I think he's the best receiver on this team. I think he has the most sure hands. I think he's the most consistent. I think Taylor Thompson should be getting number 1 targets, if not number 2 targets in this offense.
My man was open a few times and did not have a ball come his way.
He leads the team. He's second on the team. He leads the team. He's second on the team in touchdowns with 3 behind Dollison, who has 4. He is third on the team in receptions with 22. He's third on the team in receiving yards with 306, and he's averaging 13.9 yards per reception, which is 4th on the team.
I just want to see him involved a little. Yeah, I think that's an interesting one.
What has his target share been?
Ball State and Louisiana Monroe were the big ones for sure, where he got the 7 and the 9. He's got 33 targets this year. Let me see where that goes compared to everyone else. As PFF makes it impossible to find.
PFF does not have it all in.
I know. So he's 4th in targets, but he's pretty close to everyone. But you've got Ross leads him with 38, Dawson has 35, Ymir Knight has 34, Thompson has 33.
Okay.
He's done a really good job. He's the highest receiving grade of anyone on the team. Of those receiving players, he's got the best overall offensive grade of guys who aren't running backs in the receiving. I don't know. It just feels like one where he's doing a lot of things well. He seems to get open a lot. I feel like they should be giving him. I don't know. I think it would help, especially on those, you need something against a blitz. He's a guy who could run a quick little route, and I feel like he's obviously bigger bodied and could probably hold on to some of those catches maybe more than guys like Ross Dollison. Ross and Dollison are really good, I think, stretching the field and getting out in space. But when it comes to a quick boom, win a one-on-one, that maybe not be quite as much of their strength, where Thompson, I think, is a little better at that underneath intermediate stuff.
Taylor Thompson with the underneath stuff, he is 4 for 4, 10 of 11, 13 of 17. He's got 13 of 17 catches in that kind of short range. I mean, he's
Yeah.
just a dog. Like, that is where he does his best.
Yeah,
And that's where you need like that quick outlet for Alonzo Barnett.
he's been very, very good on some of those like shorter plays, and it just feels like he should. I don't know. Give him a little more run. Maybe he's your way to fix some blitz stuff, or like even a screen to Logan Kyle. Because when Logan Kyle gets going, he's been really good. Like his speed's pretty ridiculous for a G5 tight end.
Also, the seam stuff with Taylor Thompson. He's a dog in the seam. He's caught 2 of his 4 targets down the seam deep for 2 touchdowns. Seam God. Give it to me.
I want to see a little more offensive creativity. Also feels like in some of the other games when things were not going well, they were really good at using like the occasional trick play. Like Charlotte was a slugfest for a while, kind of ugly. They ran that reverse with Cam Ross for like 40 yards. Like stuff like that where you can get guys more involved in different ways. Seems like maybe a good way to break, especially if you're in a funk. They're bringing pressure up the middle. You got a screen outside or a jet sweep or something where they're coming up and boom, you hit them on the outside.
Yeah. Boom, bam, ching, boom.
That's if just let me sit down with Kennedy, who spent, years studying film, and I'll be like, just boom them. Just bam, bam, wham. Speed. Whoop. Outside. Whoop, whop.
Bam, bam, thank you, bam. Woohoo, wah, woo, how.
That's what we've been saying for a while.
Exactly. All right. Anything else you got to add before we kind of do a quick wrap up of everything happening around JMU athletics?
Not really. Boise State UNLV Friday night. If you're a G5 fan, check that one out.
Men's soccer back in action tonight, I believe. If you're listening to this the day it drops, they are playing at South Carolina tonight at 7 p.m. on ESPN Plus. JMU 7-1-5, 3-0-2 in conference. Since their loss to UVA, they've gone 2-0-1, a draw against Coastal Carolina, a 3-1 win at Georgia Southern. Take that, Statesboro. And then a 2-0 win against Kentucky, which is always a good win. Women's soccer, they continue to dominate in the Sun Belt, 6-0-1. Ginny Lackey is not human. Just to kind of give you guys a taste of what her stats have been, which is unreal. Leads the team with 23 points, has played 5 less games than the second place points getter, has scored 10 goals in 9 games with 3 assists, 39 shots.
Oof.
Very good. Very, very good. Field hockey, they're 10-4, 5-0 in conference, coming off of a tough 3-2 loss in overtime at home against Wake Forest. Next up, it's a Sunday date with Ball State up in Muncie, Indiana. And last but certainly not least, volleyball. They sit at 5-3 in conference play, but they have won their last 5 conference matches to go on a little bit of a 5-game winning streak after starting a little slow in conference, but starting to turn the page. Last weekend against Coastal Carolina, a huge weekend sweep, 3-2 win on Friday and a 3-1 victory on Saturday.
They're cooking a little bit. The schedule sets up nicely with football where they have a bye week next week, so we can preview basketball during the bye, which is incredible. Should be an exciting basketball season.
Looking forward to it. Bennett, thank you so much for coming along for the ride.
Thank you.
This has been the JMU Sports News Podcast presented by Bet Online. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. A review would mean a ton to us. Leave us 5 stars if you feel so inclined. Maybe write up a little description, little review for yourself. It can be just 3 words. These guys are great. That's 4. Oops. But just something along those lines goes a long way in helping out the podcast. If you want, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/JMU Sports News. And be sure to subscribe and comment if you're watching on our YouTube. Follow along with everything happening at JMU Sports News on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Until next week, see ya.